Hi everybody, welcome to the Fertility Coach. I'm Charlotte. If you've watched one of the videos, you will know that I have done tips 1 to 10 for getting pregnant, and that's for everybody, but especially if you are struggling to conceive like my partner and I did, my husband and I. So I wanted to do those first because I wanted people to have something that they could work on. But I also wanted to do a bit more of an introduction now about myself, my journey, where I am now, what I do, why I do it. So it's probably going to be a few parts because you'll know that, if you are going through infertility and fertility problems, or you have been, you'll know it's generally not a quick process. So I'm a fertility coach. I'm based in the UK, in the West Midlands. I am 34, I'm married to my husband Mark, and we have a little girl who's 5.5 called Remy. I'm going to try and, because I do go off, so I apologise, I'm going to try and start from the beginning and sort of keep on track. So, my diagnosis that I have endometriosis stage 4, which causes me a lot of pain, a lot of problems. I've also got fibromyalgia, and I recently discovered myself, within the last 12 months, that I am intolerant to dairy. So it's took a long time to get to that point where we've got all of the diagnosis things and we know and we can manage things. So going all the way back to the beginning really, or at least when these things started to affect me, when I was 10 years old, I started my periods, and always from day one, from period one, knew that something wasn't right. They were really heavy, really painful. Fast forward a few years, going to and from the doctors with my parents, saying, this doesn't seem right, and I was always told it's your age, they'll settle down, it's because they've just started, it's going to be your hormones, especially at 15, 16, it's a big hormone surge, blah, blah, blah. So it always affected me, it affected school, it affected friendships, things like that, because I didn't want to go and sleep at anyone's house because it would be all over my bed, all over my bed sheets. It's not very nice, and I think even now at 34 I still wouldn't be thrilled if I went to someone's house and that happened. But when I was 15 or 16, the thought of that happening was absolutely mortifying. So it affected things like that. I wouldn't wear certain clothes, I wouldn't wear certain colours. My bag always had to have like spare supplies in, spare clothes. So it really affected me from day one. Fast forward, no one would help with anything really. When I was 17, they told me to go on the pill because it would help to regulate. It did help with cycle length because my periods have always been completely out of whack, really long cycles, and very often it would be on for 35 days, off for 2 or 4 or 5 days, and then start again for another 20 days and off, and there was no consistency at all. So fast forward to me being 19 and I went to Australia, and when I was in Australia, well, I'd been there a while, and just before I was coming home, I passed out and I was taken to be checked over, and they said, we think you've got endometriosis, blah blah blah. This is what the pain will be causing you to pass out, but did some investigations and sort of said this is what needs to happen, and I was coming home within 2 weeks. So they said, right, take this letter when you get home. So luckily for me, I sort of had a diagnosis to bring home with me. And then the second stroke of luck was that when I made an appointment with my GP, he was off, and I saw like an emergency GP who said straight away, well, yeah, looking at your file, we can tell there's definitely something not right. Referred me within 2 weeks to a gynecologist who said, right, okay, coming in 2 weeks and we're going to do a laparoscopy. So at that time I was 19. And when I woke up, the the nurse was talking to me and talking to my mum who'd come to collect me, and they'd explained that if I wanted to have children, it would be quite difficult, if not impossible. And I know that we live in a day and age and a world where we have to, and people have to cover their backs, because unfortunately we live in a world where everyone's out for something, or most people anyway. So I understand that, they've got to say those things and they've got to word it in the right way. So I'll be honest, as much as I digested what she said, it didn't sink in, because I wasn't in the right place. I was 19. I wasn't even in a relationship, or the right relationship. I wasn't in the right mindset. I didn't want children at 19. It wasn't on my radar. So whilst I understood what she was saying, I didn't understand the severity of it. And that's my pet peeve number one, shall we say, that when people are given diagnosis at a stage of their life, then it doesn't particularly, affect one part of them, but it's going to in the future. I think it's something that, the healthcare systems need to come back to, because to me what should have happened was, okay, well, you're 19, we'll speak to you every year for the next few years, because like I say, I wasn't in the right place. So fast forward a few years, I'd had a few more laparoscopies, because obviously there is no cure for endometriosis, we can only keep it at bay. And I'd had a few more laparoscopies, met my now husband Mark, and I was really open and honest with him, which is another subject that I talk about a lot, that it's really hard to have those conversations with people when you've got your diagnosis and you start a new relationship. So I was quite open and honest with him, almost to the point that I'm surprised I didn't scare him off. And it was one of the first things we spoke about, and I just said, look, this is the position I'm in. I don't know how it's going to affect me until we come to that time, but I'm telling you because I don't want to waste 3 or 5 or 10 years, get there, and then you say, okay, well, if you can't give me children, I don't want to be with you. And he said, okay, well, we'll deal with that when we come to it. Fast forward a couple of years and we started trying to conceive. Now, maybe I was naive. Maybe I thought that it wasn't going to affect me. My body would have changed. You hear all these stories as soon as you say things like this, that people go, yeah, but so-and-so's sister's, daughter's, girlfriend's, mum's, whatever, was told that that wouldn't happen, and she got pregnant by mistake without trying, or it only took her 2 months, or there's always a story. Someone's always got a story. So we started trying to condense it sort of down, went to the doctors, had mefenamic acid the whole time prior to this, to try and help with blood flow, with pain, with trying to ease off. Nothing. So they told us to stop all of this stuff. Obviously stop my pill and all of that. So we'd stopped it. We'd been trying probably about a year, and went back and said, look, we know I've got endometriosis, but we're trying and it's not happening. They gave me some other things and told us to, I think my most frustrating part of it was come back in 3 months, come back in 3 months, come back in 6 months, do this, do that. So fast forward about another 6 months and they said, okay, we need to do some tests on Mark, just to make sure that we're focusing on the right thing. The Mark's tests were fine, it was me that was the problem, and that was one of the things that, I talk a lot about with mental health, if you having that diagnosis on your shoulders and labelling yourself as that, because I certainly did that. So by this point we'd been nearly 2 years of trying, and Mark hadn't got any children prior, I hadn't, and they gave me Clomid, 3 cycles of Clomid, and on cycle 2 I got pregnant, and that unfortunately resulted in a miscarriage. The 3rd cycle of Clomid didn't do anything, and they then said, okay, well, you're going to have to go down the IVF route. This was about 2.5 years we'd been trying at that point. So they said, it's going to take a while to get you a referral. Okay, that's fine. So at the start of 2013 they applied for our referral, so by this point it had been like 3 years, and we got our approval sorted in about the May to start treatment in the September, and as it happened we were getting married in the September, so we had to delay it a couple of weeks because we got married abroad. So we started in September 2013, had one cycle of IVF which failed, and at the time unfortunately my father passed away very suddenly, so that didn't work, and we had one cycle funded through the NHS. So if you are watching from another country, in the UK, depending on criteria, well, it's a bit of a postcode lottery. Sometimes you get one cycle funded, sometimes people get 3 or 4. So we got one cycle funded. So then not only did we have to deal with the fact that had failed, we just got married, we should have been blissfully happy. My father had passed away suddenly. It was then, okay, well, we've got to get money now to try again, and we've got to save some money and all of this. So the following year, 2014, we decided in the May that we were going to try again, and we started another cycle in June 2014. I got my positive pregnancy test July 2015, and that resulted in us having Remy, who's now 5.5. And maybe naively I thought that when I'd got so many weeks in that I would relax and things would start to switch off and I would enjoy this pregnancy and everything would be fine and something would click and it would be happy days. And unfortunately it wasn't that way. I suffered really badly with anxiety, I was scared. We'd already, without knowing, suffered quite a few blows to our relationship, and again I think that maybe naively we thought that getting this positive pregnancy test would fix everything, it was going to solve everything, and it didn't, because I always talk about transferring the worry. You transfer the worry of getting pregnant to staying pregnant to being pregnant in your labour and getting from one trimester to another to, oh my god, what's that pain? Oh, I'm spotting. Oh, I don't feel right. I haven't felt the baby move today. Then you transfer it to labour and giving birth. So we think that this worry is going to go away, and it's not. It just transfers along the way with you. And I think that that's something that really needs to be spoken about, because people used to say to me when I was pregnant, oh, I bet you're over the moon, aren't you? I bet you just can't wait. And I used to talk to people and say, I'll be okay when I'm holding the baby. And people used to say, oh, think positively. And it wasn't that I wasn't. It was that you can't tell somebody who's been through that many years of heartache and heartbreak to change that, because at the time I didn't know a lot about mindset. I didn't know a lot about the work I could have done on myself to help myself. As much as I'd started having some treatment, so I started with the second round of IVF, I started having fertility acupuncture, fertility hypnotherapy. I started a lot more with myself and my self-care, but I admit now it was probably from a selfish point of view that I just wanted to feel like I was doing something, because I hugely struggled with not having any control over anything and that control being taken away. So a lot of the time it was through just being able to say I was doing something, and it wasn't until it was later down the line that I realised how much it helped me. You know, and now 6 years later I'm completely into all of this, and you know, I class myself as someone who's really aligned, who really stays in tune with myself, my body, what's going on, what's happening in my mindset. If you know me personally, you know I'm huge on mindset. So I'd started making some of these changes whilst pregnant with Remy, but like I always say to people, and you know, the clients that I'm working with on my coaching programs, things don't just click overnight. You know, we can start to make changes and we start to form habits, but it takes time. So fast forward to me being 28 weeks pregnant, and I had a huge bleed and thought, okay, this is it. And it wouldn't stop. And I was actually out Christmas shopping with my husband, and we went to the hospital, and I remember just saying, something's not right, I definitely know it's not right. And in my head I'd already got that, okay, I'm going to have to give birth, and this is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And we got there and they couldn't understand why. They couldn't understand, they could see the bleeding, but they couldn't understand where it was coming from, and that was causing them huge concern. My husband was petrified and sort of said, well, are they bringing the baby now? Like, if they bring the baby now, what's going to happen? they were struggling with heartbeat, and luckily things were okay. Well, it settled down and I got put on complete bed rest. They never knew what their bleed was, and the only thing that they could have put it down to was that I had 2 eggs put back on the second IVF cycle, and that possibly something had got stuck and moved around as the baby had started moving. But as it was, thankfully everything was okay, but I got put on complete bed rest. And so many people said to me, oh, that's the best thing for you, you need to do it. And whilst it was for my body, and of course I listened, you know, I would have done anything that I was told, it was the worst thing for me mentally that could have happened, because I had all these weeks where everyone went to work, all my friends were in work, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't even go for a walk, and I just sat there and convinced myself in my head of what was going to happen. Fast forward to my due date, and you know, that there's lots of statistics that your first baby, first pregnancy, first birth is always going to be late. So I'd sort of prepared myself for it, and the midwives had prepared me for it and said, you're probably going to be late. But I was like bang on to the day that I had to get the baby out. And cutting a long story short, and I will go into my birth more one day, I had a very, very traumatic birth, very, to the point that I could see on the screen my baby's heartbeat stopping. And I'm a face watcher, so if I'm sitting in an appointment with a doctor, a nurse, whatever, I'm watching people's faces, I'm listening to what they're saying, but I'm a huge believer in, and me, hand on heart, good or bad trait, my face gives me away. And I got rushed for a cesarean, and they told me that my baby would be out in like 5 minutes, and nearly an hour later the baby still wasn't there, and I could start to see the worry just taking over everybody's face. And you know, there's this surgeon who's trying to get my baby out, and he's standing there shaking his head and sort of just telling me that this isn't going to happen. And he looked lost. He looked like he didn't know what to do next. So you can imagine me lying there and my husband next to me. We didn't know what to do. And I could just see my baby's heart rate going and going and going. And I remember crying to Mark and saying, I told you, I told you. And all I could think about in my head was that everything was ready at home. The Moses basket was downstairs. Everything. Like, I was 42 weeks by this point. Like 41 weeks, sorry. Everything was ready. I wasn't being silly and putting everything out really early. Everything was ready. We'd got everything ready there. And all I could think about was, I'm going to have to tell someone to go home and move all this stuff, because I can't walk into a house and tell people that I haven't got my baby. And by some miracle, she must have been a fighter, because they got her out eventually. And you listen for that scream, and there was no scream. And eventually there was a little bit of a cry, but long story short, because she'd been so stuck for so long, it'd completely thrown her as well. And after a few days, she was put in high dependency, and after a few days she started, she was okay, and she's completely healthy and runs around like a normal 5-year-old now. But when I talk about what I do and why I do it, like, I'm holding the tears back now, and that's 5.5 years later, and that's not because of me, that's because I don't want anyone else to go through that. And that's because I know that pain doesn't go away. I look at her and I know how blessed I am to have her. I know how fortunate we are. But it also throws things up about if we ever had another child. You know, when they did the investigations, they found out that I should never have been able to go into labour naturally. That, you know, the surgeon sort of said to me, because I felt like a failure again. I couldn't get pregnant, I couldn't stay pregnant, I couldn't even give birth. Like, someone had to put my baby inside me, and I felt like such a fraud and such a failure. And the surgeon came round to me and said, you could have pushed for 3 weeks and you wouldn't have got her out, because when we've looked, you shouldn't have been allowed to go into labour naturally. You would never have got that baby out. But I felt like a fraud. Someone had to take my baby off me and give my baby her first bottle. I couldn't breastfeed. That choice was taken away from me. She was too poorly. She got taken away. I was a complete write-off by that point. It had been like 4 days of labour, and I didn't realise how much I was depending on that time. And then I felt like a failure because I didn't bond with my baby like that, like everyone told me I was going to. Because of what happened, I gave birth and she was taken away. And I understand why, and I'm completely grateful to everybody who genuinely, hand on heart, I think saved mine and her life, because it was very touch and go. So I wouldn't have changed that, but it's not the perfect moments that we live for on videos and films and, you know, social media and Instagram and all of that BS. It's false. But it's okay to talk about it, and there is so many reasons why I do what I do, and that is one of them, that it's all right to talk about it. And just because you've had your child, I think people think, oh well, she's had a child, what's she got to moan about? Or because people do think that, they think it's moaning, complaining, or what she bitching about today. It's not that at all. It's something that my daughter's 5.5 years old, and that still affects me to this day. It still affects our future, because it's something that we think about all the time. With, if we happen to have another child, what if the worst happened? What if they couldn't save me again? What if they couldn't save her again? Or another baby again? So when people talk about how much fertility and infertility affects their life, my biggest message is, A, it's okay to talk about it. It's not a dirty subject. It's not a taboo subject. It's not frowned upon. And B, there is no off switch when you have your child. The world just doesn't revolve, like, click back to normal. It has taken me years to be able to talk about these things and help other people do it. And third, and C factor, you can have had a child 10 years ago through infertility, but if you haven't dealt with what you've had to deal with, it will always be there. So that's a little bit, like a little tiny snippet of my story. So I will be doing little bits more, and on one of the videos I will put Remy on, and she can say hello, and you can see how fight and fit she is now, and bundle of joy. But if you don't follow me over on Facebook, I'm the Fertility Coach, and if you follow me on Instagram, I'm Fertility Coach UK. If you want any more information, or you like what we're talking about, then please like, subscribe, and I'll give you some more information on me.